Hello friends, it's me, Rob, here in the Lair of OmnusI again, and yes, I know I look a little ridiculous, but, you know, I like showing off some of the different hats that I have, and, this was the time, I guess. So, this is a sort of a video response, not really, you know, critiquing a lot of the ideas, but also just giving my chance to chime in. I keep finding great content on Ginny D's channel. If you don't know her, Ginny D is a cosplayer, a DM player. She makes great video content on YouTube. She's pretty deep and has some really good videos engaging with the community in general. And, you know, she's pretty, so that doesn't hurt either. So, I do recommend checking her out. She does have excellent videos and some excellent ideas, and her cosplay stuff is pretty on point too. So anyhow, she put out a video called 10 Things DMs Wish Players Knew. And this isn't a new concept. You know, DMs and players, as much as I've tried to describe the relationship, it always seems like it's a bit of give and take, where the DMs give, the players take and do something with it, and the DMs take that back and give. But there's actually a lot more to the relationship. And a lot of times, if you're just a player, you don't necessarily appreciate all those things that the DM does beyond just what seems like a fairly simple give and take. So she went onto, I believe it was Reddit, and asked for, you know, things that the DMs wished players knew. And she got a huge amount of responses, over 500, which she distilled down into 10 because you're going to have a lot of repetition, a lot of things that are just phrased but the same general intent. And even in this, there's some kind of overlap, but by and large, I think she got a pretty good sampling of the various things that DMs, if they could have a serious conversation with their players and wanted to let them know, hey, this is what's going on with me, and, you know, maybe you should understand this. Yeah, I think it's pretty valid. So these are the 10 things that Ginny covered in her video. Number 1, DMs are constantly improvising. That may or may not be true with some DMs. I know some DMs are compulsive about details. I mean, down to all of the adults in a single village, everybody's names, everybody's jobs, sometimes even their daily schedules, where you're likely to find somebody, the names of all their children, relationships to other places, so that if anything comes up, they instantly have answers or can look up the answers. I'm not that detail-oriented, quite honestly. I improvise a lot. Sometimes in games that I've run based on my own material, sometimes I've completely run sessions with improvising, intentionally. Number 1, I'm pretty good at it. So I'm playing into my own personal strengths, and also I really like taking what the players give me and giving them a concrete adventure back. I've been doing this for over 35 years now. This isn't something that I would recommend somebody just jump in and start improvising DMing. But if after you've done it for a while and you kind of understand the ebb and flow of the game and some of the deeper core concepts of role-playing, some improvisation is almost unavoidable. DMs constantly have to grab details out of thin air, though, if their players are really curious about their world or they push beyond the boundaries of what seems like the obvious choices in a given scenario. And oftentimes that just comes out of the top of our heads. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily means that it's worse content, but sometimes you just gotta be forgiving of your DM if they had to come up with something spurious and maybe it's not quite as nailed down and buttoned in as, you know, something that's in a published adventure or something like that. Sometimes we'll give a name or we'll bring in an NPC and then forget about them because they really weren't anything that were central to the story. And if the players come back and go, oh yeah, we want to talk to that guy. Who? You know, that guy we saw in the general store. He was looking at the rope. Sam? No, that wasn't his name. You know, that kind of thing. So, understand that, we do quite a bit of things like that. Not always do we write down our most complete notes, so, generally just kind of be tolerant and forgiving. Buttoned onto that was also kind of a hope that players would come up with their own notes. Now, I'm lucky in my group. I have a chronicler in one of my groups who actually makes notes for the group. And when we start up a new session, they step forward and give us a recap of what happened the session before. That's incredibly valuable. I would recommend cultivating a culture of doing that with your own players, getting somebody who does take notes as they're playing. I have tried doing this myself. It is harder. It is a distraction, certainly. But if you have a person who's really into the game, then maybe they can kind of couch it as a journal that their character does. As a matter of fact, I have the first half of the campaign for the Tyranny of Dragons that I did exactly that. I posted down everything in the idea of a traveling journal between my two characters, Galhard and... good lord. But anyhow, that's the general idea. And it's just so much more useful for a game master, and the players can actually look up information like that too. Number 2 is DMs are on the player's side. This is not always true. There certainly are game masters who enjoy causing their players strife, and some of them feel that their success comes at a stack of broken characters and torn up character sheets. There are and have been DMs like that. Generally, they collect a small little culture of masochistical players who, enjoy having their character shredded for some reason or another. I've played only under 2 of them, and not for very long, because I generally value my characters a bit more than that. But that was a thing back in the day. These days, not so much, because the general focus of games like Dungeons & Dragons is upon an ongoing narrative, a story, as you will. And individual characters within it, while they may be interchangeable, while they may be, killable, doesn't necessarily mean that the DM is doing it deliberately. Sometimes bad luck happens and the DM just says, roll with it. Many DMs have their own style, and some of them chafe against the idea that you get to 0 hit points and then you start making death saves, and I really can't kill you unless, you get bad luck on death saves and nobody comes up to heal you. That can be galling to some old school game masters, certainly, who feel like players have too many chances to survive, and that there's too many ways around bad luck. But, quite honestly, we're really generally not rooting against the players. After all, a bad ending where the characters all die, that's not a win for us. It really isn't. We didn't get to tell our complete story. We didn't see how it all ended. And for some stories, that can be extremely unsatisfying. If the world is now doomed, well, you died, heroes, so that's it. The world's done. Maybe you have a denouement where you describe how the world ends, and that kind of sucks. But if the players got invested in something, that's probably going to be even less satisfying. We generally don't want the players failing. Occasionally not succeeding, and if they can do it in a hilarious and entertaining manner, aces. Watching a player succeed all the time is really boring too. But we generally want to see you win more than we want to see you fail, and we don't generally want to see characters die, because most of us put a fair amount of effort into keeping those characters engaged with our storylines. We throw out webs and hooks and lines and different things to attach them. We use their backgrounds to sew them into our tapestry of our game. So ripping that all out when a character dies almost is counterproductive, to the point that some game masters don't kill off player characters at all. They'll find every excuse not to let a character die, and if they do die, they'll find a way to bring them back. So we're really generally not working against you. We do play everybody, including the big bad evil guy and their minions and any other nemesis force, but really that's to provide a suitable counterpoint in the adventure for the tremendous power the heroes are eventually going to get, and also to make sure that when you do succeed, it's a challenge, it's a struggle. If it's just handed to you, that's not as much fun as if you had to work for it. And that's really what we're shooting for, not necessarily fighting you. And keep in mind, this is a game. It's not supposed to be adversarial. Everybody's supposed to have fun, not the game master is trying to beat the players. In most games. Again, there are some people who view it otherwise, but it doesn't take very long to figure that out. Number 3, the DMs are worried about doing a good job. You know, if everybody in the group is a friend, and your Dungeon Master's a guy, just your friend, you may lose track of this. But generally, any DM worth their salt really does put in a bit of effort into making sure their game is as good as possible. Sometimes they can show that by buying all these books and supplements and miniatures and 3D layouts or a battle mat in spring to make sure that they can run the game as well as possible. Some of us provide spell cards for their players so they have to do less work to make sure that we can concentrate on the storytelling and not so much about flipping through books and manuals. We really do get to the point of obsession sometimes, and really do sometimes get cruel with ourselves, judging how we did, when really it's all a relative scale. How good we did largely depends on how the players had fun and how we ended up having fun. That should be the ultimate guide, is how much fun was had for the group, which is, I think, the best way to look at it. But again, many of us are perfectionists, or certainly we have our own standards. So if we have a flat night, it can really resonate. And it is nice for us to know when players appreciate a good amount of effort. A lot of times we don't get thanked. People just come to our tables, and when the game is over, they leave the tables, and that's it. If we're lucky, they clean up their chip bags and soda cans, sometimes. But it really is something that we do work on. And for some of us who've been doing this for a long time, even if it feels like, once again, I'm here in my throne of power, once again, I have the adventure in front of me, players are at my table, you don't take it for granted. We really do want to make sure that every time we're there, it's knocking it out of the park, even if we're tired, we're distracted, a lot of things going on in the world. But really what it comes down to is we want to do our best. We want to tell a good story. And if the players appreciate that, there's any number of ways to let us know about that. But it is something that we generally worry about, and many of us work on that craft. Maybe that's watching a lot of YouTube videos on people who have ideas on how to run games, or different styles or different ideas. Maybe it involves trying to find ways of playing different games to engage the players differently. Lots of ways we can express this one, and every game master is unique in how they express that, but it is an important thing. Hello, Magic. Number 4, DMs prep more than you see. Generally, when you're running a game, at the very minimum, if you're running a pre-published adventure, the game master has read through the entire thing. Hopefully. I'm going to be referring to good game masters here. Yes, there's some hacks who just, they're just the person whose turn it is to stand in front of the group, and, maybe they do minimal preparation. But for a good game master, they look at the characters, they look at their backgrounds, their goals and interests, and they try to find things that'll weave those elements into the story. We have to do a certain amount of prep for that, otherwise we never touch on those kind of details. Sometimes it involves reading and rereading and rereading and plotting out encounters and setting up the adventure before the group even gets there, because this is going to be a key moment. You want to make sure that it has the correct impact and punch. Now, I'm not saying I always do a great job at this. A lot of the time, my fly by the seat of my pants thing may end up without having all of the impact that I could have had if I had prepped better. And yes, that is a lesson to me. I'm not a perfect game master. I will freely admit that. But sometimes the kind of focus and detail that you put in goes into a game and may not even be something that comes up. Sometimes the players veer in a different direction than you had anticipated. That's why I write my adventures like a flowchart rather than a line. If it's a railroad, you can't let the players get off if you're going to get from point A to point B. I don't do that so my players can go wherever. So what I try to do is coerce them somewhat back into the overall story by the events of the world unfolding around them. Generally works fairly well for me. So, but that means that I have to come up with the ideas of what happens if they go here, what happens if they go there. I have to create more of the world than what the players may ever see. And that is something that's fairly consistent for most game masters. So, if you just see a slice of the game and think, well, this wasn't that much work, think how about it's like an iceberg. You see the tip, but there's vastly more underneath it. So, again, that's with a dedicated game master doing this and putting a lot of their own personal effort into it. 5, DMing takes a lot of energy. This one I can confirm. When I was in theater, I really got to appreciate energy and energy transfer and using energy in a constructive way. I never really thought about it before I got into theater, but it's true. When you are in character, and I mean locked in on character, which is best done with a little premeditation and just really just focusing and delving into that character just as much, if not more so, than you would in a role-playing game. And even less personal, because that is a different character outside of yourself generally. So you really have to almost change your perspective and shift to be in that character at the moment. Yes, I know some really good actors can do it without having to get that into it, but for us amateurs, getting into character means really focusing and embracing this character and thinking about it. Then when you get up on stage, if you're going to have an impactful performance, yeah, you could go up and just recite your lines. And I've been on stage with a number of actors doing just that, but that's not acting. That's just reciting lines. If you are acting, you are into the character. But here's the interesting thing. You not only have the interplay between the characters on the stage, but so much of what you do is energy that goes out of you and into the audience. If you're doing it right, there's a lot of your personal energy that's going out. Always out. You are expending when you are on stage. And that's not even just when you're reciting your lines. That's sometimes what you're emoting, what you're gesturing, your posture, your stance. You're pouring your energy out into that scene. If everybody is doing it at the same time, it's magical. But here's the beautiful part of theater, which I loved and I missed so much, is when you're doing that, you're transferring your energy, the audience can give it right back. Timely laughter, applause, response is a flood of energy that they're sending back into you. And it can electrify you. It really can just fill you with adrenaline. A burst of energy is that I get from theater was unlike almost anything else. The only thing that came close, I think, is honestly role-playing. Part of why it's so addictive is I love that interplay, that exchange of energy. And if I give out that energy in a really good role-play session, I get some back. But there's a lot of yourself that goes into it. And players hopefully appreciate that. Hopefully you're feeling it. If I'm really, trying to give you whatever I've got, hopefully you receive that and give it back with your own burst. Sometimes as a game master, I can just sit back when the players are chit-chatting around and in character. Not always, but when it happens, you can actually feel some of the world giving the energy back to you. And that's good, but most of the time I feel like I have less energy than when I started with. I guess it depends on the group. In a group where there's been lots of laughter, everybody's had a good time, including myself, you end up sometimes with a surplus of energy. But, you have to understand when you're game mastering that can be a thing, that you can end up putting a bit of yourself into your creation, your world that you're spreading before the players. And players appreciate that. Game mastering can be draining. Ginny talks about juggling everything, and some games that's true. You can feel like you're flying between a lot of different things. How you handle that is going to vary by game master to game master. Again, because I feel comfortable flying by the seat of my pants, I usually don't sweat a lot of extra details and stuff. I can come up with things on the fly and incorporate them into the game fairly seamlessly, but for some people it really is a lot of keeping track of lots of different things. Hopefully players appreciate that. Certainly. Another one, number 6, DMs just want to have fun. Now, what different game masters find as fun can vary, and I've had this thrust in my face before. One time playing this is a personal failing of mine that I will reveal before all of you. One time I was playing in a play-by-post game with a friend. He was running the game. And we had our characters, and we had an introductory scene, and it was interesting. And so then I took my character, and I proceeded onward and started doing things. And he really, really wanted to drag everything I did out. I'm like, okay, I just want to go to the coffee shop, get some coffee, and then I want to run over. Okay, well, you go to the coffee shop. It's this big, long description. The owner comes up to you, recognizing you as a potentially good client, comes up and starts talking. And he gives what he says. And I'm like, I don't really want to have a conversation with this guy. I'm just going to be brusque and move on. And the DM hated that. He really did. He's like, I want to roleplay this. I want to have a conversation. I'm like, I want to get to the story. I want to get to what I can do in this game. Disconnect. I stopped him from having the kind of fun he wanted by role-playing the minute characters in the story that may have served to flesh out the world, but was actually more of a distraction for me because I wanted to get into whatever was really going on. I just had a rather interesting entry into this thing that suggested action, and now all of a sudden I'm talking slowly to a, it's a bit different. Play by post does play at a different pace, I'll admit, but I blew through the encounter and just trampled through until I got to meeting the other characters. That didn't allow him to have fun. It didn't allow him to do what he wanted. And I should have been a bit more patient because I have more opportunities to play than he did. So I should have indulged him a bit more. It was crass of me. And then when we actually got to playing together, they had several members at a time, and one of the players wasn't interested in playing. They were deliberately standoffish and trying to avoid being sucked in. And I, again, a failing of mine, kind of boorishly stepped in and goes, okay, you're with us now. And they're like, what? No! I'm like, I'm outside going, don't you want to play? We've got a game here. We're trying to form a group, and I'm trying to get you into the group. Wasn't interested. Didn't want to do it. So I picked the bad approach for that particular game and was like, okay, you know what, just, you don't want to play? Fine. I don't know why you're here. And then they backed out of the game, which, again, bad on me. And I'll admit, not perfect. And then I was like, okay, look, my style clearly isn't working here. I backed out of the game. Which was a really interesting and intricate game, and I'm again very regretful of what happened. I'm not terribly regretful that I'm not in the game anymore because, again, I just would have been dissatisfied with the pacing that it went in and everything, and as much as they might have actually gotten into some combat or some conflict of some sort, I just probably would have really just been going through motions because I was interested in something a little bit more meaty. But that's, again, you gotta let the game master do what they want. Now, some of them love tactical combat, and maybe you don't as a player. Maybe you're more in it for the role play. But sometimes the game master's going to include what they want because they want to get stuff out of the game too. You've gotta be tolerant. If you are in the middle of a combat and the combat suddenly stops and goes into some role playing, that may be jarring, but maybe it's just the break the game master needs at the time. So, try to be sympathetic towards the game master. Of course, communication is a good thing. If you understand the game master's needs and intents, that might be a lot easier. But, just let the game master have some fun with what they're interested in. If they really get into a character and they go with this long lore dump or role-playing exposition or something like that, just go with it every once in a while. And who knows, it might take you to something that you enjoy. And if you really don't, talk it over with the game master. Maybe you can compromise. Honestly, this game is really about compromising in general because it's rare when a group all has the exact same interests and tastes. So everybody's got to have some fun. That's the goal we're shooting for here. Number 7, DMs like it when you take the lead. Now, this again isn't always true, but a lot of us do. It's one thing to present the adventure in hand, the situation. It's another thing to lead a group by the nose. And I can seriously vouch for this one. There are some games, especially beyond Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons is a lot of simulation, so yeah, the Dungeon Master can unveil the world and draw the players where they want, and it can very much be just a guided tour of whatever the story is if you want. But there's a lot of other games out there that are narrative in scope, and really the Game Master can't be the only one making the game happen. If the players don't bite and take some accounting of their own actions and, volunteer dialogue, it, number one, helps to fill some of that space up so the Game Master isn't doing everything with all of their own energy. They can rest if the players take some time. It also shows that you're interested in the game if you actually are going to roleplay as your character and roleplay their interests, desires, goals, needs, flaws, and let that drive some of the action for a little bit. If your character is boorish and brash, and in every role-playing scenario you just do the minimum that gets you through it, you're not playing your character all that well. Being boorish and brash, if that is your flaw, played out well, can make for interesting role-playing encounters. And it leads the action narratively in the direction that your character is inclined to travel along. Role-playing well would involve doing just that, and therefore letting you take the point is actually something that most game masters are fine with. Not all of us. Some game masters really have a hard time giving up that control and having a hard time not driving action. And that's fine. But most of us do like it when the players do take the initiative and do drive the story themselves for certain levels. Some actually love having an open sandbox where the players can do whatever they want. Little challenging, certainly, but if that's the case and you have players that don't participate, it's flat. Doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't have any vectors. So that can be a real issue. So players, think about that. When you go to the table, there's a certain amount of responsibility for you to actually be participants. You are there to play, so play. Not just roll some dice, not just move your piece on the board, but play. Be a part of the game. And I would agree so much. There are some games that I've run that have been completely destroyed because the players didn't know the game very well or didn't feel comfortable and just kind of, I move forward to attack. There's a lot of games out there that need far more than that. Far more. If you're going to play something like, I don't know, the Princess Bride, the role-playing game, and you can't get into a character, can you imagine how boring that would have been if Dread Pirate Wesley had not had any of his own personality in it and just moved forward and attacked tersely, no great quips or dialogue? Can you imagine what it would be like if Humperdinck was just kind of a flat villain without the haughtiness, without the arrogance? If Inigo was not the driven by his goals and desires, but instead just put into place because we need a swordsman. Not so much fun. Why would the role-playing game be any different if you're just there because I'm just this character? It requires you to take part and act in it. Otherwise, it's going to be a very boring adventure for the most part. So, just an example. And that goes through, if you're going to play Shadowrun, why would you play Shadowrun and play like an accountant? I'm just going to be here and count up the bullets and shoot the bullets and try to get the most bullets to go into my opponents. And it's Shadowrun. Be freaking punk. If you're going to be a street samurai, have attitude. Have personality. Role play. It's so important. If you're going to be a shaman, you should have a fundamentally different outlook on things than, your wage mage counterpart. If you're going to be a decker, there's a whole culture involved in being a decker. You could be an outlier who's just, you know, basically a modern day pirate, just loving to take stuff and throw it out into the public space and messing with the man. You could be coolly professional and have your own standards that you're proud of, and absolutely are not happy unless a run runs perfectly because you've planned it out, because your skills are that good. Do stuff like that. That's good. We love that. We really do. Its character is not just a bag of abilities and stuff. Until you give it life, it's just a bag of abilities. So, number 8. DMs work hard for your fun. This kind of goes with the energy thing, but it's also a little bit more than that. This also goes with we worry that our game is good, and this is a kind of the natural, evolution of that. It's effort. We do generally work pretty hard to do that. And again, a lot of that is behind the scenes. But if you've been a game master and you've really put any effort into it, you'll know a bit of what we're talking about. This goes beyond just the prep. This goes beyond just taking notes. This goes beyond maybe getting over some insecurities about standing in front of people and talking. This generally involves, we refuse to be the person in the room providing the least amount of effort. We try to draw that out. We generally want you to have as much fun as possible. And if we get a blah response back, it's a slap in the face. Quite honestly, it can lead to a massive amount of frustration. Frustration, by the way, is what this is born out of. All of us game masters, with all the little problems that we've had with players, with groups over the years, that's what this is. It's kind of some gripes, but also it's just good reminders on things for players to be aware of, which is why I'm doing this. So, if you appreciate what your game master is doing, there's so many ways to show how grateful you are. Ginny has for you. Make sure that you're always there. That's a big one. Make sure that you don't treat the game as expendable. Give it at least the same courtesy that the game master is giving you with his time, or her time, of course. It's that, many excellent lady game masters out there, of course. But treat it with the respect that you're being given for them putting all that effort into your fun. Now, for some of us, it's also more than just time. Again, like I said, I don't necessarily spend the most amount of time diligently scribing into my notebooks and things. A lot of my effort that I put into the game comes from imagining things outside of the game and thinking about, oh, that's a twist that I can't wait to throw at the group. My entire gifter saga that I came with mostly came at work while I'm doing this boring job, and I'm just like, well, actually, it came from a dream that I had, but then it expanded out into this game. And then eventually I found the Mighty Protectors game system that I married it into, and it worked okay. But generally, that's a lot of brain power over time, creativity and imagination coming up with all of these ideas for the game. Not all of which I've even used yet. So, if my players don't show any effort, they just sit back. Maybe their characters do 2 or 3 things in the game, and most of it's just reacting to what I've had. Why? They clearly are here and present, so they put in a minimum of effort. And after that, if you aren't engaging in the story and you're just kind of sitting there, especially if you're pulling out the phone, now my game isn't really worthy of your attention, you're on the phone, that's a turnoff. No. That's a poor way of paying back the effort that goes into your game and the kind of work that we have done into it. Think about what most game masters could do if we took that effort that we put into the games and we applied it into something else. We put it into writing the next great novel. We put it into actually writing down these things and getting them published. We put them into another job. Quite honestly, if I took all the time that I put into my role-playing and working on role-playing, and I worked in another job, I'd probably be a lot better financially than I am right now. But no, this is my passion, this is my hobby, this is my thing. And as a result, I put a lot of myself into this. And if I don't feel that's being reciprocated, not to the level that I'm doing it, I think most game masters would agree, we don't expect the players to put as much into things as we do. But it would be nice if they show a little bit. So, how can you show it? Again, making sure that you show up on time, ideal, be very good. Maybe talking about things outside of the game a little bit, keeping it fresh, especially if you have a social media platform like a Facebook group, bringing up things about the game. It's like, maybe even if it's just memes, something to get everybody laughing a little bit. That's one way that you can show that you value the group and you value what the group is doing. If you want to talk about things outside of the game, it's like, hey, is it okay if my character does this? Showing that you are thinking about the game when you're not at the game. That's a nice touch. Communication with the game master too, of course. Saying, hey, thanks for the game. That was awesome. I generally try whenever I am playing to tell the game master after I'm done, thank you for the game. It was really good. And hold off on the criticism until later. Don't follow up a performance with immediately starting to rip down their stuff. They just tried for you. So maybe a little gentle critiquing, but that's as far as I would go. Don't immediately start laying the lumber down if you didn't have a good time. But definitely you do want to address that too, by the way. If we are putting in this effort, but if you're not having a good time because of something that can be fixed, let us know. Criticism is one thing, but just open communication can mean so much to letting us know that what we're doing is appreciated and that we're moving forward to give you the best game that we can. So I think that covers that pretty well. Number 9, DMs cannot do it alone. This dovetails in with the we like you to take the lead every once in a while, but it's really important that it had to come up on this twice. And again, you can have this feeling that it's the game master behind their screen, and that they are the ultimate arbiters of the world, and that the players merely dance their pawns along in that world and do their things, and the game master control. No. Even when it was just the game master, the dungeon master controlling the dungeon and the players would play in it, even back in the older days when it was still close to its wargaming roots, the game master playing by themselves, and I know there's some people who go, but solo role-playing games exist. Not the same thing. Not the same thing at all. But, that being said, I'm going to have to do a video about solo games really soon, but that's fine. But here's the thing. If the game master has to do everything, then you're just a participant. You're just there for the cheap trophy at the end. You didn't do anything. Way to go. And the game is worse for it. Storytelling is, in the old days, one person coming forward delivering information and entertainment to a group. These days, this interactive storytelling means that you're a part of it. And if you don't leave an impact on the world, then it was just a narrative. It's just the game master telling you a story, and if you didn't impact in it, then you're just rolling the dice and you're just a vehicle of chance. Now, I refute that the game master can't do it alone. Like I said, solo role-playing games do exist, and there are some players who just can't get into character. They just can't unlock that and be a part of it. But I'll tell you this, any game is a million times better if the players engage with the game and do more than the bare minimum. The effort that any given player puts in, and one player acting in the group can save the group. It's still not as good as if everybody is interacting, but if even one player is giving the game master something to work with, the game is immensely better for the game master. Is it better for the other people who aren't participating as much? Well, at least they're getting more out of their time, but it could be so much more than that if they would just be a part of it. And if a game master is not letting all the players participate, then that's not cool either, and that is something that should be brought up. Yes, no question there. But I can tell you this, a person who is just turtled up and not being a part does create a wider vacuum of energy than just the space they're occupying. That energy is funneling to fill that void and away from the rest of the group. If everybody in the group is putting their energy together in this big pool, everybody gets a lot more energy as a result. It multiplies. It's not just simple addition and subtraction, it's multiplication. The more people that are focused into the game, the more people that are helping to fill that void, everybody gets more energy back at the end. You leave excited, you leave energized. And oftentimes you don't want to let that go. You want that to carry on outside of the game, which is why engaging outside of the game and coming up with ideas for your characters and thinking about the campaign is so awesome. We love to hear about that. So, yeah, a lot of these things really do dovetail together pretty well. But that one, yeah, can we do it alone? We probably could. Now, that does not mean that the Game Master can't help the players as much as possible. Remember, we are on your side. And this is something I myself am having to kind of come to grips with, because I'm going to be dancing my players through a whirlwind of different games for one of my groups. I have to do everything I can to make it as easy for them to play as possible. Yes, the first game was Ghostbusters, which is incredibly easy to play, and that's cool. The next game is not as easy. It's going to be, Red Box Basic Dungeons and Dragons, which is so cool. I'm looking forward to it tremendously. Doing a short adventure for that. And there are enough basic concepts in there. They've played Dungeons and Dragons before, so this really shouldn't be that much of a difficult thing, but I'm purposefully going to be making it as easy as possible for them too. So we're going to be doing a lot more DM interpretation of what happens, and it's going to be good. I think we'll have a good time with that. So, but when we get to more advanced games like Alpha Omega, I'm going to have cheat sheets ready for the players that explain to them how to do different things. I'll do that prep work, because I don't want the players to struggle with learning new sets of rules and rolling their eyes at another new set of rules for the next game. I'm willing to do that, but I need the players to show that they care, show that they have an interest in their character and respond. To the point where, and really with the group that's doing Ghostbusters right now, I'm pinning my hopes that I think all of the players are high character players who really do want to be a part of things and can bring elements of their characters to life in the game and to help tell that story. That's the experience that I crave. That's what I'm shooting for. To the point where if I felt like somebody was really dogging down the group and really was not interested in that, then we'd be getting a new player. That is really the goal that I'm shooting for, and I think the players appreciate that. So, that is an important thing. Game Master can't do it alone, and shouldn't, if you've got players worth anything. The last one. This one, yeah. DMs want a chance to play. Many of us forever Game Masters do long to play, and it's not even just a matter of an equal opportunity to play and to run. No, I am more than satisfied spending most of my time running games. I love it. I've got so many campaigns in my mind. I love sitting in front of a group of players and engaging with them and helping them to accept the world around their characters and to interact with it and to tell a great story. It feels fantastic. I love doing it. And I rarely get burnt out. I can continue to find something new in just about every game and every new wrinkle. And when the games work great, they are fantastic. But there are times when you go through a little bit of a slog and your batteries start to run low because you've been putting more of your energy in than you're getting back. Sometimes breaking things up by playing is great. Now, you've heard the love that I've had for my characters, Corbrecht and Galhard. And if you've listened to any of my videos, I've related stories of some of my other characters too that have been a lot of fun. But by and large, I have a relatively small number of characters for the number of years that I've been playing, because I spend most of my time running games. And that's by design. It's not because I am forced continuously. I am chained down to this chair and beaten with sacks of oranges until I give up a game. No, I love it. I really would rather... I would rather just do this if I had my choice about only playing or only game mastering. I would only game master. That's really what that's how I'm wired. I love being the storyteller. I love being the person who's standing in front of people and relating the story and getting most of the eyes on me and watching the light dawning in my players' eyes when they get it. When the twist comes in, they're like, oh, reacting. I love it. But it is nice to play every once in a while. It is nice to have a character in a world and watch them grow and watch them try to accomplish their goals and get their needs met and do their part to save the world and gain tremendous glory and wealth. And that's all really cool. But it's not the only thing I'd ever want to do. I really do feel a strong need to run games, which is great because there's always many more players than there are game masters in almost every circumstance. So that's cool. I know I could start up probably 4 different groups right now with all different players if I really wanted to, because there are a lot of players in this area. I could do that quite easily if there wasn't this freaking virus in the way and I didn't have, a day job and a family. Darn inconvenient day jobs and families. Think of what I could do with gaming. No. Wouldn't give up where I am for anything. But it does mean that when a player steps forward and says, I want to try running a game, I jump on that like a starving squirrel in the last nut on earth. Because I know the opportunity is not going to come all that often. I know that no matter what game they want to run, what are my chances I'll ever actually get to play that game again if it's something that isn't Dungeons and Dragons? When I had a player step forward and said, I want to run a game called Exalted. I'd never heard of Exalted, honestly. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And we got into it, and I'm like, this is a really cool game world. I made a really cool character. This is great. And I'm grateful that I had the opportunity. Now I want a chance to run the game. When I've, played in a game of Shadowrun where we had rolling storytellers, it was great. I got to see what other people would throw at me, and I got to entertain my friends at the same time with characters that I knew full well because I had been running with them. And that was awesome. It was a great way to do things. But I do like to be a game master. I'm just really grateful when I get the opportunity to play every once in a while. But yeah, as of right now, I don't see that changing. I'm going to be running games for quite a while. My Mighty Protectors game is more than halfway done now, but it's still got some legs. And like I said, I am the game master central for my other group that's doing the Ghostbusters thing right now. They're going to be led by me as a game master for quite a while. So I don't know when the next time I get to play is. One of my friends said he wants to run a Rogue Traders game. That's okay, that's cool. I love Warhammer 40k universe. I look forward to getting a shot at that. So we'll see what happens when that happens. I've got so many different characters I'd love to do in the Warhammer 40k game. I've got this idea for a tech priest that I'd love to run. But who knows? Will it happen? I don't know. The future is always uncertain. So we'll see. But those are the 10 questions that Ginny brought, are 10 things that Game Masters wish that the players knew. Game Master and Dungeon Master are interchangeable there, because I think some of those things that are strictly for D&D, they apply equally well to all games, quite honestly. And I would also like to add in just a few other things. Sometimes, if the Game Master is out of energy, there's nothing wrong with calling it a night and having a game night with board games and card games instead. Refuel your batteries that way. It can be fun just being a participant rather than being the person that is running the game. And as far as, always being the DM, there's a lot of online stuff out there too that can help to refill your batteries, giving you a chance to play and do other things too. So you forever game masters out there are options. So I would advise you to take a look into those. Maybe they're not as good as sitting there at the table with your friends and everything, but there are options. There's ways out there that you can stop yourself from being burned out and frustrated. At least a little bit more. And always, always, always a standby of discussion in the Lair of OmnusI. Communication. People just say what they're feeling, say what they mean. That a lot of these pent-up frustrations don't just end up on a Reddit board somewhere. They end up at your table, acted upon, and hopefully leading everybody to a better game. So, I want to thank Ginny D for coming up with this topic. Like I said, I've so much good stuff on her channel, folks. If you haven't seen Ginny D, I highly recommend her. If you've enjoyed this take, I invite you, if you haven't already, to like and subscribe. I always appreciate the feedback. More than anything else, I hope you would comment below. Give us something to converse about. I always respond and look forward to anybody's opinions or thoughts or anything of the nature. But I appreciate you being here and listening to my video. So thank you very much. Until next time, I am Rob here in the Lair of OmnusI, and I'll see you the next time I crawl in front of this camera and make one of these videos. Thank you. Farewell.